Good morning, Binanceans. Welcome back to this week's episode of Binance Beach, and I am stoked to be joined again by Adam Stokes. Adam, thanks for coming back onto the pod.
Liam, good to see you, and I'm digging that surfboard in the background there.
Yeah, this is our Binance board. There's actually a clip of me surfing it on YouTube somewhere if you go looking. But yeah, we'll have to pull it out again this summer and have a go. If you're in town, I'll give you a surf lesson.
Epic. Yep, I'm on it.
Awesome. For those of us who didn't see Adam's previous episode, he is an economist, crypto commentator, author, and animal lover. Last time we chatted about why Bitcoin is important in Australia, but today we're going to be covering what happened to Uptober. It was hyped. I saw it on crypto Twitter. Uptober is coming. We're going to see green candles. And unfortunately, so far, we've got basically nothing but red. So let's dive into why that is, what might be driving that, and yeah, when we can expect markets to turn around. But before we do, I want to cover a bit of breaking news this morning, which shocked me when I woke up and I first checked crypto Twitter like I do most days. It is an unhealthy habit. A new HBO documentary claims to have uncovered the real identity of Bitcoin creator Satoshi Nakamoto. The documentary features Bitcoin legends, including Adam Back and Samson Mow. It says it will shock the world, even the US election, and it's due to air on Wednesday, October 8th. So just in a couple of days, which is crazy. So, Adam, what's your initial response to this? Is it a good thing if we learn who Satoshi is? I'm sure we're going to see some really nuanced takes on this over the next week or over the next few days. But yeah, give us your initial response on this potentially groundbreaking documentary.
Look, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because first of all, it's immediate clickbait. Maybe there's truth and they do know who Satoshi is. Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a them? Is it a group of people? When we go to the fundamentals of it, it kind of doesn't matter in the sense that it doesn't actually change the code. So we've heard lots of conspiracy theories per se that it was the Russians and they did it so it's going to crash the US dollar. It was the CIA to get us all addicted onto the internet's funny money to get us ready for a CBDC. It was a group of cypherpunks. Who knows? And I am excited to see the documentary, but ultimately it doesn't change the code. It doesn't change the fundamentals. And although there's been allegations in the past that once we know who Satoshi is, it's going to send Bitcoin to zero. I don't think that's the case. And I just wonder, will Craig Wright be mentioned in the video?
Yes, that was one of the first thing one of our team members said when I shared that in an internal group chat was, can we check if Dr. Craig Wright has funded this documentary? But yeah, I agree with you. I think to imagine that suddenly, just because we know who Bitcoin's creator is, that all of the value that the network brings to people's lives, that it's just going to disappear. It's still an incredible store of value. It's still a hard money. It's still the most portable money in the world. It still is a protocol that people can use to shift economic value across borders, across time, across space. And nothing changes about that just if we know who Satoshi is. And even then, like, Satoshi still would have no control over the network as far as I understand it. And I'm sure we'll see some more nuanced takes on that too, but he would have potentially the ability to move the market if he still is in control of the funds that he has. I think it's nearly $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin and 1 million Bitcoins. He would definitely move the market, but he still couldn't control or take over the protocol. He's far beyond a 51% attack. So even if we learn, maybe it might cause some short-term recoil, but this is going to be fascinating to play out. I really hope this documentary finishes, and I think there could be a clue in the Bitcoin legends that they are featuring in the documentary. I really hope it's a very pro-Bitcoin story. It reinforces the narrative, and it finishes with, we are all Satoshi. That would be absolutely brilliant. I would be so happy to see that. But let's see, right? I've got no idea how this is going to play out. This is going to be a developing
maybe that's the catch
story.
on it, that they say, we are Satoshi. We have discovered who Satoshi is. It's all of us. But just touching on those million Bitcoin that Satoshi holds, I watched this fascinating, almost a spiritual documentary where they're saying those million Bitcoin it's a virtual testament or statue or monument to what Satoshi has created. And you can see that some are saying that Satoshi should be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I see a lot of truth in that as well. But let's say, for the worst case scenario, Satoshi is alive. He's an individual. He's got the million Bitcoin and he dumps those million Bitcoin. Absolutely, that will spook the market and pull the price down. But it's just like another speed hump, if you will, that we go through in this timeline. If you remember, we were worried about the Mt. Gox coins. That's kind of settled down. We were worried about other coins that have been held by central bodies. Once they were released, such as Grayscale, that kind of settled down. So when we have these big honeypots, per se, of Bitcoin, and then they're released onto the market, sure, it affects the price, but it's like Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin just keeps cracking on. It sees this little glitch in the timeline, and she continues to crack on.
Absolutely. And I wonder whether the original Satoshi Bitcoins could even be considered to be almost like higher value than other Bitcoins, or whether people would be almost scrambling to buy Satoshi's Bitcoins off him.
Absolutely.
I think given the cult nature of the Bitcoin community, I could definitely see that happening. But significant sell pressure could have a pretty significant impact on the market. Let's stay in touch with this story. That's going to be super interesting to watch. Well, let's move on to Uptober, or the lack thereof. Is Uptober in the room with us right now? It's a great question. I haven't seen Uptober just yet. A Bitcoin price, probably off the back of geopolitical tensions on literally the last day of September, is down 6.83% on the week to about $60,000. But we see often volatility on this short-term geopolitical news, and I think it's well worth taking a look at the report that BlackRock did, or the white paper that BlackRock did very recently, only released it in the last week or two. This is well worth a read on the S&P, gold, and Bitcoin performance through major geopolitical events, which I think you could argue is what we're going through right now. Critically, I want to draw your attention to the 10-day return and 60-day return of Bitcoin versus those two comparative assets in the S&P and the gold. And we can see that Bitcoin does often see short-term volatility, but generally rebounds in a strong way. What's your initial response to Bitcoin's volatility so far in Uptober, or Downtober, as I think we should call it so far, Adam? What are you looking at in the market?
Look, it's interesting, isn't it, Liam? Because what I say that is the constant truth is that in crypto, anything can happen. And this just proves it yet again. So many people were shocked when in September, we pulled back, and that was kind of textbook. We pulled back and people are like, oh my God. And it's like, no, this is actually a good thing because we expected this. And finally, Bitcoin is sticking to its plan and to its trajectory and doing what we know historically. When we go to Uptober or Rocktober, and we can see it was kind of fizzled down to almost nothing. You're right. What happened in the Middle East had an immediate effect on the markets. When hundreds of missiles come raining down from one nation to another nation, that spooks the market. And we can see this time and time again. And I really like that table that you brought up there, where we can see in the past any type of geopolitical uncertainties has an effect not just on crypto, but on all financial markets. Look, my sentiment on this is ultimately it doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to change anything. Again, Bitcoin has these little hurdles, and then it gets over it and then moves on very quickly. The tragic, bittersweet, if you will, in this situation is that during global conflict, any conflict, but the bigger the conflict, the reality is, in pure economic terms, the money printer turns on. And when the money printer turns on, we have more global liquidity. And when we have more global liquidity, prices of hard assets generally go up. So I spoke about this on my show recently on Wednesday night on the Crypto Campfire, where we were morally conflicted in the sense that we've positioned ourselves to be in a good financial position with Bitcoin. We hoped it to go up naturally in October. The first few days of October, conflict breaks out, spooks the market pulls back, and it's like, oh, that wasn't so good. However, we're like, well, if this expands and it goes to a global conflict, which we hope it doesn't do, the economic reality is that the money printer turns on, puts more global liquidity in, and away we go. Ultimately, Bitcoin wasn't affected too badly, as we can see, $61,038 at time of recording right now. But of course, if we put things in perspective, Liam, we are more than 100% higher than October last year. Around this time last year, we were around the $29,000 to $30,000 mark, looking at whichever data set you'd like to. But ultimately, yeah, we are 100% higher, more than 100% higher than this time last year. It's early days in October. There's a lot of, I think, dry powder in the bags. There's a lot of confidence in the markets. We're only warming up. So ultimately, I think we'll get over it.
I think we will too. An important point which I've heard made is the reason behind this short-term volatility for Bitcoin is that it is the most liquid, global, and always open, always on market. And when these kind of events happen and potentially markets cascade and traders face margin calls or need to sell assets for whatever reason, they don't sell what they want to sell, they sell what they can sell. And they can sell Bitcoin because Bitcoin is an always on global liquid market. That's the feature. It's not the bug. And so when we're looking at this asset and this asset class more broadly, that is one of the primary reasons, if not the primary reason, for that short-term volatility that we constantly see from Bitcoin, particularly through these events. But have the fundamentals changed? No. Has the code changed? No. Has the number of Bitcoin that are ever going to be mined changed? No. The fundamentals are still the exact same. And so if this is an asset that you're looking at in the long term, then the volatility in the short term might not faze you so much as somebody who doesn't have as deeper understanding of Bitcoin, what it is, and why it's important.
I like what you say about the liquidity point there. I've been going through some deep thought experiments with liquidity, and I think you've nailed it there. Bitcoin is actually the most, or crypto, the most liquid market, depending which coin. We'll go with Bitcoin to keep it simple. The most liquid market in the world. And I think in many instances, it's more liquid. This might be quite controversial, what I'm about to say. In some ways, it's more liquid than the US dollar itself. Allow me to explain. If I want to move millions of dollars of the US dollar around the world very quickly, I actually can't move it as quickly as I can a stable coin or Bitcoin. And when we actually break that down into a big perspective of, right, I need to move funds very quickly, we'll go to a very illiquid market, let's say real estate. Sure, there might be a lot of value in real estate, but it takes a lot of time and effort. And it's very slow and cumbersome to liquidate a property. And you can't liquidate part of a property, you've got to liquidate pretty much the whole thing. Then you go into Bitcoin at the other end of the spectrum, where, as you said, the markets are always open, 24/7, 365, open to anyone who's got an internet connection, and permissionless is the big key there, where you can just move this money around very quickly. Then you go into the US dollar as an example, and you say, well, hang on, that's what liquidity is, because it's converting it into this liquid cash. But it's like, well, actually, no, I think the markets are starting to discover that if you want true liquidity, at least in the component of movement, being able to move funds from point A to point B, it's slower to do so in the US dollar or any fiat, because you have to go through a centralized third party, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 3 days transaction clearances, permission for the banks to allow us to do it. But with Bitcoin, you don't need to do that at all. So remember, when we move Bitcoin just from one exchange to another, or from an exchange, off an exchange to a cold wallet, that in itself can spook a market. So when you see a lot of Bitcoin held on Binance as an example, and then we get a whale signal of $1 billion worth of Bitcoin pulled off Binance and put into a cold wallet, that can create some confidence. But if we go the other way, it can actually create a bit of fear, where people say, oh, a whale is about to dump some Bitcoin. So I think the whole paradigm of liquidity and in moving money around the world is shifting. And ultimately, when many people say to me, well, when I go from, Bitcoin to the dollar, back to Bitcoin and so forth, I think the big picture, we're not going to have this transaction or this transfer going from Bitcoin to the dollar and the dollar back to Bitcoin. Many years in the future, I look forward to a world where we won't be transacting in dollars, we'll be transacting in Satoshis.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see the point you're making there. I'm reading a book at the moment called Check Your Financial Privilege, and I actually want to do an episode on that in the coming weeks because it's got some fantastic stories about Bitcoin being used by real people around the world, and particularly in disadvantaged countries and disadvantaged communities that have historically really struggled due to conflict or reliance on the US dollar or hyperinflation of their local currencies. And it's a perfect illustration of your point, right? When someone in El Salvador is attempting to move or get funds from a relative or someone who's moved to another country, like the US or like Australia, who is working and trying to send funds back to their family, the cost to do that is really, really high. But when you send it with Bitcoin or with stables, you can do so instantly, essentially instantly, quickly, without permission. It's such an effective and almost brainless process, and it makes so much sense. And so for us in the West, we use Bitcoin as a saving and investment vehicle, and we see some of the benefits. But when you look to some of the global examples where Bitcoin is really getting traction and cementing itself into communities, not just as a medium of exchange, but as a store of value, you see how, yeah, I guess true that point you make is, and how liquid and how effective and how efficient this asset really is as a monetary system. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it can save lives. Expanding on that, where you see like natural disasters as an example, where there's been a natural disaster and we're trying to get money to help from any nation to another nation to say, right, we want to help these people. It's quicker to do it in crypto. It doesn't matter which coin you choose. It's much quicker to do it in crypto. So if we want to move, I don't know, $1 billion to a flood affected nation, it's much easier with less friction, faster, smoother, cheaper, safer, more secure, more transparent to do it on the chain. And pick your coin, go with a stable coin if you don't want the volatility of any crypto. It's much quicker to do that than going through banks. And so this is where, it gets quite spiritual in the sense where it's like, hang on, the speed of the movement of money can actually save lives. And that when it goes beyond, as you mentioned, you nailed it there as well, where you say, right, in the West, we're about, buy low, sell high. We want to get that Lambo. We have this financial privilege where it's like, well, why do we need this digital funny money? But in developing and third world nations, they need it as a matter of survival. But as a global community, we can use this technology where we can send value, therefore support to anywhere in the world very quickly, thus saving lives.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing to watch. I'm definitely going to do an episode on some of the stories in that book and some of the broader stories I've heard about crypto adoption globally, and I hope that's one that, yeah, will bring a bit of a different perspective to a lot of people. Let's move on and take a look at alts. Alts down over the last 7 days. There's a lot of red here. ETH down nearly 10%, BNB 8.2, Solana 10.5, XRP nearly 11 off the back of the news that the SEC is going to appeal that decision in one of the Ripple court cases. Meme coins too, Dogecoin down nearly 10%. So definitely we're seeing the rest of the market follow Bitcoin, which is pretty standard. Across the ETFs, I thought there was an interesting call out here earlier. Prior to, I guess, in the expectation of Uptober, we saw some pretty solid inflows to both the Bitcoin and, for the first time, the Ethereum ETF, basically since it launched, saw some significant net inflows, but they have turned negative again now that we've seen this kind of start to Downtober. I'm just going to start calling it Downtober. Really quickly, Adam, do you think the ETFs are a net positive, or a detractor for the crypto space?
Great question. So if we go back in time, we'll go to so we've had BTC spot-backed ETFs around the world for a while, but of course we were focusing on what was happening in the United States being the center of gravity for money. And we were hoping that once the ETFs were approved in the States, the spot-backed ETFs, not the dirty future paper ones, that Bitcoin would go to the moon. Now, nothing really happened. There wasn't much movement when it was approved and when all the money started to flow in. And I think primarily that's because you had Grayscale dumping a lot of its Bitcoin, whilst all the other ETF fund managers were buying a lot of that Bitcoin, and that push-pull effect actually evened it out. Then when it came to the Ethereum spot-backed ETFs, I like that little chart that you brought up there, because it's like finally we had some input into those ETFs. That was most certainly buy the rumor and sell the news. Nothing has really happened with Ethereum there at all. Is it a good or a bad thing? I think it's just another milestone, and it also legitimizes Bitcoin even further, or crypto even further. So many people who say that crypto is a scam, the first thing I say, well, if it was truly a scam, the Australian Taxation Office, the IRS, and other taxation officers around the world wouldn't be taxing this asset. They would be confiscating it or shutting it down or reporting it to the police, or take your pick. Bitcoin has been legitimized and crypto has been legitimized through financial accounting, such as taxes. The next financial accounting legitimization of this asset, of course, is ETFs. So as we move from, there's been so many iterations of looking at Bitcoin as a scam. It's not real because I can't touch it. It's digital funny money. I can make my own Bitcoin. It's unlimited. I can reprint it. There can be a 51% hack. The government will never allow it. It's for terrorists and criminals. All of these things that we keep going through, that they all sort of push to the rear of the queue now, that we don't really look at these anymore. Then it's like, well, it's not really real because governments don't recognize it. Well, it's taxed, and we're talking about it in presidential campaigns. Well, it's not really real because the banks won't allow it. Well, in fact, the biggest financial fund manager in the world, BlackRock, has most certainly legitimized it by creating an ETF, offering it to their customers, and pouring billions upon billions of dollars into it. So big picture, it is just another milestone that we have reached in crypto. It is a good thing. It is not the end of the line. It's just another step on the way to the moon.
And what a phenomenal Trojan horse for adoption. And I agree. I think the
Well said.
credibility it lends the Bitcoin brand and the crypto space more broadly is very net positive for us. How are you looking at the Fed pivot? We saw a 50 basis point rate cut. Was it too little, too much? And has your outlook for the rest of the year changed at all? Are you still bullish crypto and bullish risk assets?
I was expecting a 25-point cut. We were all expecting a cut. Most certainly it wasn't going to go up. There's many factors coming into this. Of course, you have the election coming up, and it was almost inevitable that the Fed, even though, let's face it, even though they're supposed to be operating independently, we have to live in reality here. There are political influences over the Fed. There is no doubt whatsoever. When you have a presidential election coming up in a very short matter of time, and the economy is hurting in many ways, a rate cut, or at least a rate hold, was most certainly on the table. I thought 50 basis points was quite surprising. I thought, wow, that's a lot in a very short time. Now we expect to see further rate cuts, and when you actually break it down, the 50 basis points was probably so they could catch up on what they should have done earlier. The world is hurting. We're in a very difficult situation. In many nations, they're in stagflation. We have high unemployment, low growth, high inflation. It is a real mess. And governments around the world, left and right, many nations, they're trying to pull these traditional economic levers that are just no longer having the effect of the past. That is, they're trying to curb inflation by raising interest rates, but that has many other flow-on effects, like people essentially going hungry, not being able to afford their homes, businesses shutting down, creating more unemployment, putting a higher demand on the welfare state, therefore increasing the need for money printer to go burr. And all of it comes down to the layer one solution to all of this. The layer one solution, or fault, the fault is fiat. The solution is Bitcoin. When you have an unlimited money that you can just simply print without consequence to those who print it, but to those who have to deal with it, that is the people themselves. Both sides of governments and banks are addicted to the ability to print money endlessly. The antithesis to this, of course, is a hard, sound, scarce, immutable, neutral, borderless money, which is Bitcoin. And whoever makes the first move globally, which country makes the first move where they realize that they can print this fake, funny money called fiat for the hard, true, scarce money of Bitcoin, they're pretty much set up to win. And I think all of the nations, the Trojan horse that you touched on before is a beautiful analogy for what's happening with Bitcoin, not just with ETFs, but within the political space as well. I think what many nations don't realize is that they're all actually lining up on the starting line of the Bitcoin race, not for the retail investors, not for the institutional investors, but for the federal investors per se, for the nations that are like, actually, we have to let go of this fake money, this money of war, this money of inflation, this money of complete fraud. I would go to that extent, and we need to adopt Bitcoin. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see more interest cuts, rate cuts. I'm very disappointed that Australia hasn't followed suit. And I'll close this little rant with this, Liam. Isn't it funny in Australia that when the Fed puts rates up, we're very quick to follow suit. But when the Fed cuts its rates, we're very slow to respond. And that is not just a coincidence. That is obvious that if you're a bank and you have the ability to enjoy a higher return on a loan that you gave out before, for no extra paperwork, for no extra risk, you're just simply generating double what you were in the past. It's obviously in your best interest to keep those rates as high as possible for as long as possible. Australia is in a position absolutely to cut those interest rates. When we cut those interest rates in Australia, we stimulate the economy, we create employment, we drive businesses to move forward, and hopefully we take some of the pressure off the welfare state, which in turn takes some of the pressure off the money printer.
Yeah, there's a rabbit hole we could definitely go down. Let's earmark that for another episode. Let's circle back to that conversation in a few weeks. I want to finish with some final notes for bears. If you are feeling a little shook by the volatility we've seen this week, I want to share a couple of my favorite tweets from this week. Is maybe a regular section. I'll start to sum a lot of those favorite tweets from the week. This one from Rahat, from the Federal Reserve's website. It costs 9.4 cents per note to produce a $100 bill. That seems crazy. Almost everyone in the world gives away their time and energy for pieces of paper that can be produced at 1/1000th of the value we assign to them. I thought that was really, really interesting to know. If you want a bit of a reality check on the monetary supply, 80% of all dollars were created in the last 5 years. Thanks for this one, Bitcoin Teddy. That chart is just remarkable, particularly obviously through that COVID period, which is that massive spike you can see there. And most critically, we're seeing the uptrend continue this year and in the last few months, particularly as we've dropped interest rates. Expect to see that continue. There's only one currency that hasn't been debased since 2000. Thanks, Pomp. That's Bitcoin. You can see the Aussie dollar there, fourth from the bottom and right in the middle of the pack at minus 85% since the year 2000, since the turn of the century. And yeah, I'll finish with what I think is definitely the best meme account on Twitter. Naive, what are you going to do what are you going to buy when Bitcoin is worth millions? The dip.
That is
so
gold.
do you have any final words for the bears, Adam? Anything to close with before we sign off this week?
Yeah, I think to the new bears, if you will, if you're new to the markets, you're quite scared and you are not used to this. The price of performance is volatility. That volatility gives us this price performance. And as you touched on before, Liam, because crypto is so liquid and so rapid, we expect to see these rapid movements in the markets. But just as quickly as crypto can pull down, it can go up and away. And I still expect to see this market to take off. Even in the short term, we're looking strong. In the medium term, we're looking great. And in the long term, we're looking even stronger again. If in doubt, pan out, dollar cost average, stay the course, and you'll be okay.
Go long, get paid. Thanks so much for joining us, Adam. It was great to have you back on the program, and we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure, Liam. Good to see you.
Awesome. Let me finish with a disclaimer. As always, please note this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance. Please subscribe, please follow our social channels, and let us know what we can do better and who else we should have on the pod. Also, come and see us at the Australian Crypto Convention. We'd love to chat to all our users and Binance Beach listeners there. Till next week, guys, have a fantastic King's birthday long weekend, and we'll chat with you next week. Howdy.